Today in episode 125 of Rail Talk, that's sort of a milestone, we react to a huge weekend of Derby preps, update our Mage Rage Derby standings, talk to Anna Ford, the executive director of New Vocations, about the aftercare issue, and listen to both sides on the Lasix debate ahead of a big HISA vote. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And John, episode 125, I think that's about how hot it's going to be down in Ocala next week. But considering what an awful winter it's been, beggars can't be choosers.
Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. And Joe, I'm actually going to be in the beautiful Sunshine State a little longer than you are because my nephew Griffin and his soon-to-be beautiful bride Emily are getting married on Sunday just outside of Orlando. So big congratulations to those two. Emily, welcome to the crazy family. Be sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. That's all I have to say about that. And I know that the entire Green family will be listening to this. So, Joe, make me sound smart.
Congrats to the happy couple. Let's start the show. The opinions expressed on Rail Talk are those of hosts Joe Bianca and John Green and do not reflect those of anybody we work with or work for. Rail Talk is sponsored by Facing Tipton. You hear us talk all about the digital sales and the opportunities that they afford. Last week, the 2026 February digital sale closed with gross sales of over $5.8 million for 189 horses sold. Offerings included horses of racing age, racing and broodmare prospects, broodmares including mares with foals at foot. That's so adorable. Stallion prospects, short yearlings, and a 2-year-old in training. Neon Beach is a multiple stakes winning daughter of Omaha Beach, sold for $300,000 to top the sale, consigned by Jeff Bloom, winner at 2, 3, and 4. She won last year's Ouija board distaff stakes and the Wasted Tears stakes on turf. So earned over $745,000 and came in off of a 3-length win in an allowance company in her last start. So if you're looking to reset and recharge and refuel the barn for 2026, the digital sales are the way to go. There's another one coming up in March 19th through the 24th. And then, of course, we are all looking forward to that Gallop only Mid-Atlantic 2-year-olds in training sale, May 18th through the 19th. We'll be there. West Point will be there. May 12th through the 14th is the Undertax show. Major shout out to Facing Tipton, always on the cutting edge for being the first to do that at a major 2-year-old sale. And of course, stay tuned and stay locked in to the March digital sale. Entries close March 9th. And then there's the April digital sale, April 16th through the 21st, and the May digital sale, May 7th through the 12th. As always, you can learn more and view catalogs at digital.facingtipton.com. Okay, so now it feels like the Derby Trail is officially in full swing. We had a huge weekend of preps, the Fountain of Youth and the Rebel in particular. And the Fountain of Youth we'll talk about first because this was the first 100-plus buyer figure that we've seen from a very stacked 3-year-old class so far this year. It was a great battle in the stretch between Commandment and Chief Wallaby. And, Chief Wallaby with only the 1 start going 7 furlongs under his belt. And you read some of the quotes from Bill Mott before the race, talking about, our hand is kind of forced if we want to make it to the Derby. I'd rather not be running here. The horse ran pretty damn well for, a trainer that, seemed kind of reluctant about entering in that race. So you got to think he's got a bright future, even if it's not necessarily on Derby day. But Commandment, very impressive. And he has the right kind of style that you need usually in a Derby, where he's got enough speed to lay close, but he's not a runoff. He's not a deep closer. I love that stalking kind of tactic and that style going into the Derby. He's super accomplished. He had the blowout win and the Mucho Macho Man before this. You got to think, unless like some huge figure Todd Pletcher horse comes in out of nowhere, he's going to be a heavy favorite in the Florida Derby. We'll talk about the Rebel as well, but that, I thought the Fountain of Youth kind of stood out, John, as high quality just from watching it and then also seeing the figures.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Joe. Not only the 101 buyer, which stamps Commandment as one of the favorites, for the Derby, but the way he did it, the way he was able to sit off it, and was a tepid favorite in the race. But there were, 4 horses that were all within 3-1 and really 9-2 going into the race. So this race did separate a few horses. Commandment, Chief Wallaby. I think Solitude Dude put in a really good race. Definitely, I think, is more of a day mile horse, more so than a mile and an eighth or a mile and a quarter Derby type horse. But I think those three horses really showed themselves well in their in the race. Again, I don't think the Solitude Dude is going to go on to run a mile and a quarter, but he is certainly a horse that you want to watch going 7/8 to a mile, going forward, as his pedigree does, lend itself to do. I think the other horses in the race, that maybe disappointed a little bit. Rocky's Balboa, albeit was a 50-1 shot, and
I was like, what? The 90-1 shot?
Yeah, and just never really, got there after the first half mile. You can talk about Napoleon Solo as well, who was on my fantasy team. That maybe just didn't knock the rust off properly, maybe wasn't 100% ready for this race, but I think put in a lackluster, off the bench race, certainly, although I'm not writing him off yet off the Derby campaign. But yeah, Joe, to me, that was Commandment, Chief Wallaby really stood out as the horses to watch for the next few races going into the Kentucky Derby. And I don't think we're going to talk too much about the Gotham, but I thought Iron Honor showed himself very well in that race. I'm not so sure if there was anyone else in the race that I would say, wow, I want to make sure that I have him drafted for my next round of the Mage Rage contest. But the undefeated son of Nyquist, now 2 for 2, I thought was pretty impressive, albeit a very tepid 90 buyer.
Yeah, no, I thought I generally, like, it pains me to say it, but I just feel like these Aqueduct Derby preps are, kind of more and more irrelevant as time goes on. And I don't know, maybe once we get racing at the new Belmont and they end up there, that'll be a different story. But I didn't think that looked like a super strong race. And he was all out to get past Crown the Buckeye, who, ran a big race, setting a quick pace. I thought Iron Honor was going to blow by him, but he ran well enough. And it was, I think it was only his second start, right? So yeah. It's certainly can be forgiving that he's not a finished product just yet. There was a lot of big movement. We'll talk about the Rebel real quick. There was a nice battle down to the wire between Class President and Silent Tactic. Silent Tactic pretty much looked like he had him measured the whole stretch. Didn't quite go by. Shows you that it's a different deal winning the Southwest and coming with that big rush and being able to blow by horses as opposed to winning a stretch duel, which is, requires like a kind of a different mindset and different fortitude. And that doesn't mean that Silent Tactic doesn't have that. This is an experience. It's about building experience through the Derby trail and heading into the Derby. And I think he'll be better off for having that, and so too for Class President. And there's been a lot of movement already on the Derby trail. In the Derby contest, rather. And the first movement was my first pick getting the hell off of the Derby trail 5 seconds after I chose him. So we are officially off and running with Plutarch no longer on the Derby trail. So I'm going to keep his points, but you'll see every time we throw up the standings now, he's going to be in red or crossed out, just to let you know that he's no longer on the Derby trail. But Sam, off to a tremendous start. Sam and John both. But how about Sam? So she had Commandment, who we just said won the Fountain of Youth. She had Chief Wallaby, ran second in the Fountain of Youth. She had the 1-2 in the Fountain of Youth. Knowing her, she probably crushed the Exacta as well. She had Litmus Test, who was third in the Rebel Stakes. And she had Class President, who was first in the Rebel. So she had the 1-2 in the Fountain of Youth and the 1-3 in the Rebel. In the Rebel. Mm-hmm. So Jeez, that's a great opening salvo. John did pretty well as well. He had Iron Honor, who won the Gotham. He had Blackout Time, who placed somewhere or something. Where did he run?
Finished fourth in the Rebel.
Yeah, finished fourth in the Rebel, and then he had Bravaro, who was fourth in the Fountain of Youth, and then Napoleon Solo, who was fifth in the Fountain of Youth. So, just as the standings are right now, it's I don't want to discount everyone else who had movement just because I'm jealous. Silent Tactic ran second for Andrew. Lauren, she had Soldier and Diplomat?
She had Soldier and Diplomat, who ran fifth, I think, somewhere.
Fifth in the Rebel.
Yep.
And then I did manage to get 15 points for Solitude Dude running third in the Fountain of Youth. But as John mentioned, I don't think that he's going to necessarily be a mile and a quarter horse. John, your reaction as you and Sam sprint out to the front early on.
Well, the nice thing about it is there are many, many, many more races to come, Joe. And, I'm happy for Sam because she needs this in her life. She needs to be first in this contest. Doesn't really have a lot else going on. And I will tip my cap to her, that in the first coming out of the gate, at the first call, first quarter, that she is in front. But Joe, I want to pivot a little bit away from the contest to talk.
Wait, let me just do the standings real quick, and then I'll let you pivot.
Good.
And then your pivot is
I'm mid-pivot. I'm mid-pivot. Hurry.
Okay. All right. Sam's in first, 189. John's in second, 170. Andrew's in third, 136. Lauren's fourth, 82. And I'm fifth, 53. Go ahead. Continue with your pivot.
No, you're right. You're the professional, and we should make sure that the contest, who sponsors our show, gets their full due.
By the way, yes, shout out to Mage and Mage Rage. And it's my first and enduring excuse if I finish last is that I had to host while doing the draft. So just be prepared for that. But yeah, you want to give a hat tip to Airdrie and the team?
Well, no, of course. I mean, Brett Jones and Airdrie and the team, are friends of the show, personal friends of mine, and we have some mares there as well. And just first class operation, have been that way for well over 50 years, or as long as I can remember. Airdrie was always the place to go when you wanted to buy good, solid yearlings, and now they've expanded their stallion roster to have really good valued stallions in there as well. And you talk about the last, two of the last three Derby winners with Mystic Dan and Mage in their roster, Cairo Prince and the rest of the group that's their upstart. There is value plays all up and down the Airdrie roster.
Yeah, no doubt. And, Mage is a value play, honestly. He was staying on for $15,000 this year. You get a Kentucky Derby winner, leading 3-year-old of 2023 by earnings. Had weanlings showed well at the Keeneland sale, averaged over 126,000, which is a good amount for a yearling, obviously for a weanling rather. Obviously, Baeza, half brothers, grade 1 winner. Dornock, you all know about the family and Puka. So I think that's a really good value, $15,000 right now for Mage. And I think that's going to go up when his horses hit the track. John, were there any other pivots you wanted to make?
Well, just with regard to keeping it down in Oaklawn, I thought Counting Stars ran a really nice race in the Honeybee, and I know you're going to want to talk about it because it's one of the West Point horses. But man, after the reason why it was such a good race, in my estimation, is she put in such a clunker in the Martha Washington. I remember talking to you about it afterwards, and that was about as down as I've seen you. So I'm so happy to see that she bounced back, and whatever the issue was, Team Cassie has figured it out and gotten her back onto the Oaks Trail as a legitimate contender.
No doubt. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, that was a rough weekend with her and with Sandman and Super Corridor all like throwing in clunkers the same weekend. So that was great to see her bounce back. I would argue she was best in that race, considering all the ground loss that she had around both turns, but she is just such a finicky horse. Like, you just don't know what you're going to get from her. And honestly, I think that that's a good thing, because now she's going to, let me rephrase. I think it's a good thing that she needs more Kentucky Oaks points because she's so finicky. I want to see her do it again. Mm-hmm. Now, if she had won that race, she would have had 50 points. That's usually enough to get you into the Oaks starting gate, but she's got 25 now. She probably needs to run 1, 2, 3 in her next race. Maybe fourth gets in, depending on who else is out there. But for a horse like her, do we really want to go to the Oaks off of a bad race?
Right.
And now it's like you get to see her one more time. She's going to run in the fantasy for $1 million on March 27th. It's going to keep her home. And that's going to be a great test for her to see if she can string back-to-back races together against top-level competition. But she ran so great and so admirably, and she's just such a beautiful horse. And we're over the moon about her in general, just her temperament and, the already double stakes winner. So, yeah, it was awesome to see her bounce back. But I do like that now she has to do it again. She has to prove it again in order to get into the Oaks. Because if she does and she runs well next time in the fantasy, then you really feel good about going into the Oaks. Whereas if she had won this race and then she runs 6th or 7th in the fantasy, you're like, should we really go or not? She's got to punch her ticket. And I think, John, that's what you need for an inconsistent horse like that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's good that she had the bounce back race, but you bring up a really good point with regard to the actual Oaks points and status, we think, oh, the Derby's the important when you get points because 20 horses are going to get into the starting gate, 18 if you include the fact that there's an automatic Euro and an automatic Japanese horse that's in there. But the Oaks is only it's 14 horses, limited to 14 horses, and you have to make sure that you're in the top dozen or so going into the last week before, or the last 2 weeks, I guess, before the Oaks. Otherwise, there's no guarantee. So yeah, she's going to need to hit the board for a lot of reasons. I think for your own confidence and knowing that you're entering the right horse into the Oaks and that she's on the upswing is good. But man, I'm so happy for you guys that you had a bounce back race like that. And basically, hopefully, after running, next in the next prep, that you'll just be able to draw a line right through the Martha Washington like it never happened.
Yeah, I hope so, because that's what we did with the Keeneland race that she ran poorly in the fall. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And hopefully we can make it 2 for 2, because Super Corridor, the champion 2-year-old filly, is going to run this Sunday in the Santa Isabel Stakes at Santa Anita. We're recording this Tuesday. The entries come out today, so I don't know what the field looks like. But I think with Explorer having run just now at Oaklawn, sounds like Meaning, who won the Las Vergenes, is going to wait for the Santa Anita Oaks. Hopefully we catch a field where it's like, we don't have to go toe to toe with a championship quality filly, 22-45 like she did last time. I will also say that, I'm not like telling any tales out of school here, but we did find out after the race last time. We pulled her blood like a week or two later, and she had an elevated SAA level, which usually means that the horse is kind of dealing with an underlying illness of some sort. So she had been healthy going into the race, looked great, was training great, and just obviously didn't run well. And then a lot of times they'll show the symptoms of an illness later on. Right. So I'm hopeful that that's what it was, and that there was a real excuse for her, because she's bounced back. She's had 2 really nice works since then. And, if she's feeling good and she got a little hot too that day at Santa Anita. And if she keeps her cool, I think that, she's obviously a top level horse in this filly division and is ready to bounce back. And I will say that Explorer got an 88 buyer for the race on, or for the Honeybee. Mm-hmm. And then Counting Stars got an 87 for this 3-year-old filly class. Mm-hmm. Like, that is a gigantic figure. So I think that that's worth noting as well. John, one other horse I wanted to touch on before we wrap up the weekend reaction is Knightsbridge, because he is the real freaking deal. And yeah, you could say it wasn't like a super field on Saturday in the Gulfstream Mile. I mean, I would argue that that's probably because people knew he was going there and were like, I don't want to run into that monster. Thank you very much. I mean, he has just been an absolute revelation over this winter. Won by 11 1/4 lengths, just did it completely in hand. 112 buyer for that race. Yep. And obviously, the next question is like, can he stretch out? Because he's done everything from 7 furlongs to a mile, has no peers. John, I would argue that this is the second best dirt horse in the world right now after Forever Young.
It's certainly an argument. I mean, again, you look at Godolphin and just how well their homebreds have been doing, and this is right out of their family tree. You got a Nyquist out of a Bernardini mare, which is pretty much, unless it was like Street Sense or Medallia in there somewhere, that is right out of their family tree. What's really amazing to me about Knightsbridge isn't even that he's won 6 out of 8 or finished in the top 3 in all 8 of his starts. It's now, Joe, he's run November, December, January, and February. For the first time in his career, in his explosive career, he is consistently running and dancing every dance every 4 or 5 weeks, which is a wonderful thing to see. The other thing is, like you mentioned, if he can go even further, how stacked is this older division? I mean, there's top horses that I know we complain a lot that the top horses retire too early, but not this year. I mean, this year, if these top 10 or so older horses end up making it all the way through the calendar year, what kind of classic are we going to have in November?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Godolphin's got 2 of the biggest ones, with Sovereignty coming back and with Knightsbridge as well. It's interesting to think about what they do with him now, because, I mean, for several reasons, I think the Dubai World Cup is out of the question. Ship overseas, all the turmoil that's going on there. We don't even know if the Dubai World Cup's even going to be run. We can talk about that later when there's actually an official decision being made. I don't know, maybe like the Ali Sheba or something, like before Derby on Derby Day. Like, there's no obvious, a huge race.
Right.
Locally or domestically for older horses until I would say the Met Mile on Belmont Day. So maybe the Alashiba or something, but he's so good right now that like I would be worried to just like kick him out into the field for 90 days and hope he comes back as good as he is now. Right.
Yeah. And I think that obviously they're going to have a game plan for him and hopefully have a race. I don't have, we don't have the time right now to be able to look up and see what's at Keeneland or even what's at Churchill, but there's going to be an important race at one of those two fields. And then, as you mentioned, if they go to the Met Mile, on Belmont weekend, which again is the last year that it's going to be actually at Saratoga.
Yep. No, I'll be up there. A whole team will be up there, and also I got my Belmont Park hoodie on.
Look at you.
And that's one thing I also want to touch on real quick is we are just over 6 months away from the scheduled opening of Belmont Park. I'm going to be out on the backstretch tomorrow. I'm going to, see how close they are to finish. It sounds like they're pretty close. The Jockey Club Gold Cup and the Flower Bowl are coming back to Belmont, and that warms my cold New York heart to hear that, because Jockey Club Gold Cup, maybe the most outside of the Belmont Stakes, probably the most iconic race that was historically run at Belmont Park. And it just never felt right to me being up at Saratoga, where it's just yet another grade one on one of those big weekends. So it's coming down. And not only is it coming back down to Belmont, they're going to run it on opening day. Friday, September 18th will be the Grade 1 Jockey Club Gold Cup. I love that for us. I'm going to be out there. I hope plenty of people who are in the New York City area come out for opening day, opening weekend, because it's a real blessing to have Belmont back, presumably in the fall. The Flower Bowl, also another big race that they ran on Saratoga's closing weekend, seemed kind of like an afterthought. Also coming back to Belmont Park. And, listen, I'm not going to sit here and like litigate like, oh, well, does it look enough like the old Belmont and this and that? I got to say, after going to Aqueduct for the last 2.5 years, pretty much every week, I'm happy for a brand new racetrack, $450 million racetrack to be coming to New York City. And I think you should be too.
Yep. And Joe, this just in, Naira and Woodbine Entertainment announced the Empire Trillium Series, which is a 14 race program of stake races restricted to horses that are foaled in either the Empire State, meaning New York, or Canada. And those series of races are worth over $3 million in total purses. And that is going to start when Belmont Park reopens in September of 26, following a multi-year project to create a world-class racing and entertainment destination on the longest of islands. Joe, we are breaking news all over the place.
I was going to say, look at our little Lehigh journalism grad, John Green. Breaking news. That's awesome. Good find by you, and great job by Naira and Woodbine. We always say it, not enough cooperation in this game. So something we'd like to see in the Mid-Atlantic more. That's huge, because as we've said many times, like the synthetic track in the winter is going to be a boon for those Woodbine horses, assuming they come down. And this just furthers that partnership and that possibility. And, you can complain about the synthetic all you want. I guarantee you the average field size next winter is going to be significantly higher than this past winter or any recent winter at Aqueduct. That's awesome. That's great news. Great cooperation. Good job, John. That's well done finding that, because
tip of the cap to Naira and Woodbine for announcing it. And usually the announcements come like an hour after we're done recording. This time it came in like just literally in the past 20 minutes. It came in. So
exactly.
So kudos to you, Naira. We bust on you for a lot of reasons, but I'm glad to see that you got together with Woodbine to start this association. And you're gonna, like you said, Joe, you're gonna see a lot of these horses navigate themselves south of the border. Maybe take the Niagara Express all the way down to Long Island and run in some of these Tapeta races. And those are restricted, that series, to just New York and Canadian bred horses.
Tremendous. I wore my Belmont Park hoodie on a good day. And if anybody at Woodbine wants to send me a Woodbine hoodie, I'll wear that one next week, because we're always looking for merch. Rail Talk is sponsored by Epic Insurance Brokers, one of the nation's top retail insurance brokers, providing expertise across key lines of insurance like property and casualty, employee benefits, and unique specialty insurance. Our buddy Chris Moore leads Epic's equine specialty practice. Can't wait to see him down in Ocala by the Tiki Bar next week. You see him at the sales, the races. He's got horses. He breeds horses. He knows this game inside and out. Many equine mortality policies renew around yearling sales time, so if you're listening, you're probably halfway through your policy. That's a good point in time to review your current insurance plan, make sure it's working the way it's supposed to. Might need to update horse values. Where do you stand on your deductible? And of course, with the 2-year-old sales coming up, how will buying and selling there impact your policy? Give Chris a call or shoot him a text at 317-650-4519. As I mentioned, happy and proud and excited to see him at the Ocala sales and have a Corona with him. So you should probably do the same. He's a great hang and he knows the industry inside and out. Now, that brings us to this week's
Epic Performance of the Week.
This week's epic performance of the week is a human athlete. We usually give it to equine athletes. Want to give a shout out to Dylan Davis, who came back and rode over the weekend at Gulfstream Park, his first time riding in races in 3.5 months. And even this alone, the fact that he came back so quickly, here's a list of his injuries that he suffered in a spill at Aqueduct on November 14th. 9 fractured ribs, a collapsed left lung, broken right collarbone, and hairline fracture of his upper right arm. So he started getting back on horses at Palm Meadows in February, came back in his riding races. And I want to shout out Dylan, obviously, in particular, but just jockeys in general, like the athleticism and the ability to heal and to get back on horses so quickly, but then also the wherewithal and the guts it takes, because he easily could have died in that spill. And that's a risk that these jockeys take every single day when they get on a horse, and yet they never let it phase them. When they have an injury, when they have a spill, they're back riding, usually faster than you would expect a human to be able to. John, very impressive just in general, jockey's fortitude, and Dylan being back in 3 months after all his injuries.
Well, that's the amazing thing about it, Joe, is like, I get a hangnail from pickleball and I'm like out for a month and a half.
Right.
And these guys, like you said, they risk their lives every single time they get on horseback, and take that into account when they choose this vocation. But, Dylan is an individual I look up to. He's a tremendous athlete, and I'm really happy to see him literally back in the saddle again. And hopefully we'll be winning races again. But it's an amazing, amazing feat that he got back, to where he is right now as quickly as he did. And he is deserved of the epic performance of the week.
Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Our boy, Len Green, owns over 200 horses with DJ Stable. They won over 2,600 races, have a champion fresh on, well on her way to another monster season, I would hope. The Green Group has close to 1,000 clients in the horse business because they make them money and save them taxes. Len, John told me, he's going to be setting up shop at the Ocala sale next week. Always happy to take on some new clients, especially when they're fans and listeners of Rail Talk, because there's a significantly exclusive offer in it for you. A complimentary, confidential half-hour consultation where Len guarantees that he will find you value. All you got to do is call him up at, what's that number, Michael Agresta? 732-634-5100. Green Group. Or go to greenco.com and do it soon. We're obviously recording this in March 3rd. Tax season, tax day is less than 6 weeks away. So you want to get involved now with Len and get all of the benefits of the expertise of him and the Green Group. But you don't have to take it from me. Take it from yet another satisfied Green Group client and friend of the show, our buddy, Randy Miles, who we'll be seeing also next week down in Ocala. Tell him all about it, Randy.
It started a long time ago, probably 10 years ago. We needed some real help, both my partner and I, and we called Lynn, and he made us feel very comfortable. And we have been with Lynn for 10 years. He knows the horse business. He knows the game. He makes us feel super, super comfortable about the ins and outs of what we're trying to do. And so it's a good marriage between two country boys that don't know much about the taxes and a really smart guy. And plus, he's in the horse business. So it makes us feel that more comfortable.
Thank you, Randy. One of our favorite people in the business. Another one of our favorite people in the business, Len Green. Love when there's that synergy. John, I believe you have a story.
Yeah, I was just down in Ocala about a week and a half ago and was over at Randy Miles and Bo Hunt's place watching some horses train. And Randy said to me, "John, your dad is unbelievable." And I said, "Well, let me count the ways. But why do you think, Randy?" And he said, "Because I went ahead and I put in my backyard a putting green." And Len said that if I bring clients out there and I talk business while we're putting and practicing reading greens and everything like that, that I could write it off. And you know what? Randy did. And so, so he was so happy because I don't know if you know, but it costs a lot of money to move earth and to get it, to an undulating green scenario. Well, as long as Randy follows some certain rules that Len set out for him, that is going to be a write-off for Randy Miles and his wife.
Love it. Love it. And that's kind of expertise that you need to be getting in on the ground floor of when you call or Len or go to his website at greenco.com. Like I said, do it soon. Be like Randy, 732-634-5100. Shout out to the whole team at the Green Group. It's the era of the letter to the editor. There's been letters to the editor left and right every time I look, and I think that's great. Honestly, yes. I think it's great for industry stakeholders, anybody who puts money through the windows or through the breeding or ownership game, to let their thoughts be known, especially in conjunction with each other, because I think that makes the biggest impact. And to wit, there was a letter to the editor in the TDN last week called "The Horse Must Come First with Any Reform Efforts," and it's signed by trainers Bill Mott, Chad Brown, Mark Cassie, Jenna Antonucci, and Ron Moquette, many friends of the show, and Eric Hamelbeck, the CEO of the National HBPA. This is about the upcoming vote in May. I believe it's May 22nd from the HISA board to decide on whether or not Lasix is going to be banned across the sport going forward. Now, when HISA came aboard and, it was first instituted, they came up with kind of the middle ground rule that we currently have, which is that Lasix is not allowed in 2-year-old races or stakes races. It's allowed in every other race. Now, the question before them is whether or not the board of directors, and I remember board of directors is whether or not to allow Lasix in any capacity. And, the trainers and Eric Hamelbeck and the folks who wrote this letter, I thought made a very compelling case. And it's basically, I'll just read a little bit of it. It starts, "If a human Olympic runner bled into his lungs every time he sprinted, no one would call treatment, quote, cheating. They would call it medicine. Yet calls to eliminate furosemide, commonly known as Lasix, from horse racing are often framed as a necessary stand against, quote, doping. It's a powerful word. It signals integrity. It reassures the public. But when rhetoric outpaces veterinary reality, well-intentioned policy can produce unintended consequences." I have always felt, and we haven't spent a lot of time on this, John, I think in part because I was just so tired of the debate, the back and forth, but now the rubber's meeting the road and we have to figure out what's going to be best for the sport and for the horse before this vote in May. And I've always felt personally that Lasix is not a performance enhancing substance. It's a performance enabling substance. And they make that case very well in this letter to the editor that this is a byproduct of racing thoroughbreds at high speed, is that occasionally they're going to have pulmonary hemorrhage, and it's something that can be very, very detrimental to them. And, in rare cases, even fatal. It's a horrible, horrible thing. And I don't see the arguments really for not using it, because a lot of horses are going to suffer if you don't use it. You're not going to weed this out of the breed overnight. And B, don't we already have enough problems with field size and foal crop size as it is? Do we really want to take artificial steps to further limit the amount of horses that we can have born and racing and on the track? Because that is a completely separate problem that I think will have downstream negative consequences if we do ban Lasix. Now, this is the standard disclaimer is I'm not a veterinarian. I don't work with horses every day. I'm sure there's plenty of people who feel otherwise and just want water, hay, and oats and all that stuff. John, my feeling is that this is a solution in search of a problem, but curious what you think.
Well, there's two things at hand, Joe. Number one is there's anecdotal versus scientific analysis of whether or not how Lasix helps or benefits the athlete. Okay, that's first and foremost. And then the second issue is that, like you mentioned, in your lead in, on May 23rd, that's the statutory deadline by the federal government, that basically they have said to us, we're going to let you kick this can down the road for 3 years. And then once that 3-year window is up, we want to know from you, from this board of 9 people that has to be unanimously voted. We want to know what your recommendation is that we were going to add and include in this federal statute. So this is serious stakes here, at play. And normally when I first heard that it had to be a 9-0 unanimous vote required, I was like, how are we going to get 9 people together who are going to decide whether or not Lasix should be used, unilaterally amongst all levels of racing and all ages of racing, or not, completely not? Now, that is not actually the case. What this 9-person panel has to do is they are charged with evaluating and dissecting 5 different studies that were paid for, funded by HISA. And basically they were done by independent scientists, vets, and researchers. And those 5 studies are going to be added as evidence for this 9-person panel to go through and make decisions on whether or not Lasix should be used at all, not at all, or somewhere in between. Now, they can vote at anything in between, Joe, and that's an important distinction, is that it's not Lasix 100%, Lasix 0%. They could come in and they can say, after reviewing all the evidence and all the data and the studies, we have decided that we are going to keep the deal as is. And 2-year-olds can't run on Lasix. Stake races can't be run on Lasix, but everything else can be run on Lasix. So it's not just a all or nothing situation. They can go all, nothing, or anything in between, as long as all 9 people unanimously vote in that direction.
So is
now, the last thing I'll say is that the studies, unfortunately, are not going to be made public at this time. And the reason being is because those studies that were being paid for by HISA, the people who putting together the studies said that we want these studies to be available for peer review. Okay. And when you're in academia, that's so important to get peer review articles and studies published. So the studies themselves will not be made public by the time that the May 23rd statutory deadline is in place, but they are likely to be made public probably before the end of the year, if not the first quarter of next year. So those studies for public consumption is not going to happen until after the statute has been voted upon. But they will be available once their the respective peer reviews have been completed. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we got that information out there, because I'm sure people are saying, well, why can't we see the studies? Well, we as lay people don't have access to the studies until they've gone through the peer review process.
Gotcha. And just like, if it were up to you, if it were a 1-person board, John Green is the decider, where would you land?
I think the system they have right now seems to work. And I know that's not a sexy answer, but to me, that's the right answer. And what people have to remember also is that when horses bleed, due to exercising, there's a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meaning that unless you stuck a scope up the horse's nose, you wouldn't even know that anything had changed, internally, to a 5 where there's actual visible blood pouring out of the horse's nose. Okay. And there's a scale in between. So, to me, this modification of having Lasix be utilized the way it is, and not for stake races, so it doesn't touch the sacred, ground of black type, God forbid. Okay. And more importantly, 2-year-olds that maybe aren't physically ready to run, they're not mature enough to run yet and campaign, those horses shouldn't have Lasix added where they're being, asked to run when they're not fully developed and capable of running yet. So I like where the parameters are right now. I think people in the industry have either said, yeah, that's a fair modification on it, as long as it doesn't, hurt 2-year-olds, and as long as it doesn't touch the sacred soil of black type, and that seems to be working. But Joe, if you took it away completely, then all these horses that need Lasix would flood to the states that aren't under HISA rule right now. So West Virginia would have full racing, Texas would have full racing, and Canada, I guess, would also have full racing. That they would take over a lot of these horses that needed to have Lasix in order to compete to the best of their abilities.
Yeah, I do think that we have a good middle ground right now, because the biggest complaint I hear is that it's gonna weaken the breed by letting too many horses be on Lasix. First of all, I got news for you. We are so far beyond that point right now. Yeah. You know how many horses would have to suffer and how long it would take for you to reverse this and get it completely out of the blood and the genetics of the modern racehorse? It would take decades. And I don't know that that's something we want to undertake. But secondly, as John mentions, we are banning it in stakes races. So if a horse is a bleeder, chances are they're not going to get to those top level races and be attractive to breeders. So you already have somewhat solved that problem there. I agree that the 2-year-olds are a good exemption because they're already dealing with a lot of development and growth throughout the year. You don't want to add anything else to it because one of the side effects of Lasix is that they lose a lot of weight, they lose a lot of fluids, they potentially lose calcium in the bones. So it's just something that you don't want to add. You don't want to add those side effects on top of a horse who's already developing musculoskeletally. So I think we're in a good spot, and I don't think anything needs to be changed. And I think most of the trainers have said the same thing. Graham Motion was quoted as saying that this is a good middle ground. So I hope that we stick on the current path. And I never understood the anti-Lasix absolutists and the Puritans, the anti-Lasix Puritans, because it just this is a problem that racehorses have in America, at least. Do something to help them, or otherwise stop racing them. Like that, to me, those are the only two options. And, I don't want to hear from they don't use it in Europe and all these other places. You're telling me that horses don't bleed in Europe? They do. They just maybe not as frequently, but they're still going to suffer in a way that they wouldn't with Lasix. So we gotta deal with the reality that American racing has. And the reality is, many horses do have this problem, not all of them, but we have to do our best to take care of the ones that we do have. And as I mentioned, why would we do anything to artificially suppress field size and fall crop size when we already have such an issue with that? So that's kind of where we stand. We'll keep everyone posted as we get closer to that main vote. One other thing to touch on, and John, you probably have more insight on this than I do, but more on the Jockey Club and Rapoli back and forth. Aron Wellman of Eclipse and Pat Cummings jumped on a little town hall last week. About 150 people joined them, and Anita Motion was there as well. And obviously all three very, very insightful people who have decades of experience in this game. John, maybe you have more insight on this and what it accomplished.
Yeah, I watched it. I wasn't able to attend it live, but I did watch it afterwards. And that's, Joe, that's one of the reasons why you and I don't do the show live, because we're of a society that that wants it when we're ready, when we want it. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch it live, but they did have over 6,000 people that logged in and watched it afterwards, I being one of them. And I think my overarching takeaway from all of this was these are good things, Joe. These town halls and our conversations and when people have civil conversations on Twitter, the few times that they do, that this is forcing everyone to get together and to sit around the table and try to address the issues at hand rather than just sling mud at each other and say, well, everything that's going on is your fault. And I'll get to a perfect example of that in a moment. But, Aron Wellman's a friend of mine. We're on a couple of boards together, whether it's the Breeders' Cup or the Thoroughbred Racing Initiative, and a couple other ones that we're on together. And we collaboratively work together. We own horses together, and I think very highly of him. The more I've gotten to speak to Pat Cummings, the more I can see that he is a genuine, intelligent person who really is well-spoken and wants what's best for the industry. And Anita and Graham Motion, I mean, we don't need to say any more accolades than we already have. They're both friends of the show. They also care tremendously about the horses that they have in their campaigns, and as well as the industry as a whole. But these conversations need to continue to happen. They need to continue to happen because we need to collaborate together. There are so many smart entrepreneurial people in the business that want the business to succeed and, quite frankly, live on for another, for decades at a time, that we need to recognize what problems they are. And I think one of the issues that are at hand, and I am a perfect example of this, is that when people are demonstrative and loud and don't listen, I tune them out. And what I tune out is the messenger and not necessarily the message. And I think what Aron has successfully done is he's taken the demonstrative voice of Mike Rapoli out of the equation here and replaced it with himself and with Pat Cummings and other people who can explain and listen as to what the problems are. But basically, we're saying all the same things that Mike said for years, which is our product is deteriorating. Our leadership is ineffective because for a lot of reasons, whether or not they have the actual jurisdiction to be able to make changes or not, we don't have that central body of leadership that we need. And the vision of how to run and how to market the sport is really lacking compared to other competitors that we have. And I say competitors, meaning like for the almighty dollar and for people's eyeballs and times. And I think that these town hall meetings or our conversations or other things that go on the internet, we're all fighting for reform because we don't want the status quo of the way that the industry is sitting right now to ultimately have it die on the vine. And Joe, how many times have you and I said, that we're on top of the game right now? And it's not a humble brag. It's that the West Points, the DJs, the Rapolis, the Eclipses, the LNJs, they're on top of the industry right now. And if we're the ones that are fighting for change, then that change is required. So to me, I think it was great that Aron and Pat and Anita and the 150 or so attendees that got on the call when it was live, that they are having these conversations and they're asking for more conversations. We're all begging for all the powers that be to get together and recognize what some of these issues are. Now, one of the good things that has been birthed out of these conversations, these difficult conversations, is the fact that, Joe, this week, the TAA, the members from the Jockey Club, members from representatives from all the sales companies, and the owners or representatives of the top 16 to 18 farms in the country all got together to talk about aftercare funding. And that would not have happened if it wasn't for Mike Rapoli's insistence, if it wasn't for Aron Wellman's influence, if it wasn't for us shouting from the rooftops that we need to have change. These meetings would not have happened. And it was spearheaded by friend of the show, Brett Jones. And, Brett, we can't say enough about you as a person. We love you as a friend and as a leader in the industry who, oh, by the way, is on the Jockey Club. Okay. And wants to have change, wants to initiate change. Brett spearheaded this organization to get together, this meeting to get together, to have all of these minds get together and figure out a way to pay for aftercare. Because just like all of us are saying it, and Mike, Rapoli has the biggest voice in all this, if we can't figure our shit out together on retirement, we don't deserve to have this sport. And you know what? He's 100% right. So they all got together and they are putting together a plan on how to fund aftercare. And I don't think I'm speaking at a school when I say this, Joe, but the topic right now, or the way to fund it right now, the proposal that's out there for everyone to consider is that half of the stud fees, one half of one stud fee of every horse that they stand at stud needs to go into a pool of money to pay for aftercare. So if you're standing a horse for $10,000, you owe $5,000 voluntarily right now to this fund for aftercare. And that's what they're pushing to try to fund it. And if they do that for all of the stallions that are being bred to 50 or more mares, okay, then you're going to raise between $8 and $10 million for aftercare. Now, that is a beautiful thing. And in the past, and Anna Ford talks about this in our interview with her, she said, years ago when the TA got together to set up accreditation, we also set it up a funding model. And we just never could get it past like the voluntary side of it. The farms basically backed out and said, our syndicates don't want to pay the money to aftercare in this form. Well, now there are ways, and I'm not going to give it away, but now there are ways to tie it to registration and or to other registrations that you want to be a part of. Excuse me. Where funding is going to be mandatory. So if you want to be able to have your foals be eligible for New Jersey breeding program, you have to make a payment. If you want to have the foals of these stallions be eligible for fill in the blank, then when you make your stallion payment, you have to pay 1/2 of one stud fee if your stallion is bred to 50 or more mares. Now, Joe, to me, that is exactly why you and I have been shouting into the void. I can't speak for Aron or Pat or even Mike or other people who are fighting the good fight. But to me, it's not you guys suck. You guys are doing this wrong. And therefore you shouldn't be around anymore. It's, hey, the industry as a whole sucks. And we need to fix these problems or go away.
Yeah. And well, this is what we wanted. And I got to give a hat tip to Mike Rapoli for finally realizing he was doing more harm than good by being the face of this reform movement. Now, I'm sure he's going to continue to tweet and there will be, he'll have ideas and he'll have a lot of energy, which is good. But as long as he was the face, it was just going to be a personality contest between him and the Jockey Club, and everything else was going to be lost in the shuffle. So I appreciate him taking a step back and letting Pat Cummings, who's one of the smartest guys that we know in this business and very reform-minded, and Aron and some other people take the lead, because that was the first step to actually having substantive conversations that lead to action. And now, to me, there's no excuse for people at the Jockey Club not to participate.
Yep.
Because the excuse before would have been, well, listen, I'm not going to get in a room with Mike and just have him yell at us and tell us how incompetent we are for hours, because that's happened. Now you don't have that excuse. Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty and we're getting down to the actual meat of the argument. So there's no reason not to show up at some of these town halls, and I hope they're ongoing, and to have it out and to discuss what we all could be doing better. And I do think that this is a really good first step, and I appreciate everyone who's taking it on, because, yeah, it does feel like sometimes that we're shouting into the void. And I think that we're not alone. I think a lot of other people, like regular people who are just fans or betters of the sport, feel like, they can see what's wrong and they can see the deterioration, and they express themselves on social media or wherever else it may be. Why is nothing ever being done to address it? And this is the first step towards that. And I'm appreciative of it. And like I said, appreciative of Mike for taking a back seat. I think that probably took a lot. And yeah, we're happy to host anybody that wants to come on and have a good faith debate and, have, a back and forth about the issues that need to be solved. But yeah, I think the main takeaway is now that Mike is no longer the face of it and it's not just a war of personalities, I think the Jockey Club needs to come to the table and start being a part of some of these discussions. And that doesn't mean that you can't defend your record. Like, it's not like the Jockey Club has no successes to speak of over the years. So you can do that, and, you can make points in terms of like what you're doing that might be in the shadows and not being recognized. But I think you also have to recognize some shortcomings and some inertia and the way that we shake that up. And there's so many smart people. That's one of the things that I'm always reminded by when, you get into these conversations. There's so many smart, successful people in this business that this is a hobby for them. And this is not something that, like you said, that Mike Rapoli has to do. Obviously Aron in Eclipse, he's got a business that relies on it, but I'm sure he could go find something else, to do and then be successful in it. Like, in general, this is something that people are doing with their free time or, with extra time based beyond like just what they normally would dedicate to it. So we are very lucky that we have a wealth of knowledgeable people and, well-off people and successful people to draw from in order to fix the sport going forward. It's time we all got in a room, and no egos. No, I'm smarter than you because I had this success in my life and that success. Everybody who's put $1 into this industry has the right to have an opinion and have their voices heard. And we are we have gotten in our own way for a long time because of all the infighting and not been unified and shown the strength in that unity in having so many smart people care about the future of our game.
And Joe, the last thing I'll say is that, and I'm going to steal a quote from Aron Wellman from the show. In his closing, he said, "It's not easy to speak out publicly against the status quo. It's not easy to speak out against the status quo." And you know what? He's 100% right. And what's even more apparent as far as why we need to speak out against the status quo is that, you know, Mike and then Aron and then Carter Wilkie wrote a good piece for the Pollock Report. And then Craig Banderoff, who's a member of the Jockey Club, wrote a letter to the editor. And then, you know, you got the David O'Farrells of the world and the Brett Joneses of the world that are on, you know, the Jockey Club board with a capital B. I mean, I'm a member with a little M, but they're on the board with a capital B. And that they're starting to come out and publicly, I don't want to say denounce, but at least publicly say, the emperor's not wearing any clothes. We need to get together and fix some stuff. And here's the way we should do it. It's not easy to be involved when, when the status quo, you don't know about the uncertainty. But I give a tremendous amount of credit to the people that are trying to make change and trying to show that they want to be involved. Not just, oh, this is shitty and you guys suck. It's, you know what? We need to get together and here are some solutions. And that to me is the way that you move things forward, is you get smart entrepreneurial people dedicated to the industry who want to make change. And doesn't matter what happened before, doesn't matter what their organizations did or didn't do before. It's what is this new regime doing in order to try to move the sport forward? And I would say just give the Jockey Club a chance to make some of these changes and implement some of these things that are going on. Let them, let them hire a Charlotte Clement to be involved in what's going on, which I think, I don't know her, but from what I've heard was a very savvy hiring, and let them, send out 400 different tracers. So that way for free, so that the chip readers, so that way we can improve on, the lifetime traceability of horses. So we don't have a glut of horses going to the kill shelters or going to other countries where we lose track of them. But let some of these programs blossom and develop and grow before we publicly denounce them because they came from one organization or the other. So just keep talking, keep communicating. Let's see if we have so many smart entrepreneurial people in our business that do this part-time, let alone full-time, but find out, how do we dig deeper? How do we mine into their knowledge and experiences and try to make this industry better? Because that's never been done before, to the detriment to where we are right now. So I'm just saying, give it a chance, let some things develop and grow, and let the new regime, whether it's a top, with Everett Dobson, or the board members of the capital B that just came in, like Gary Felton and Brett Jones and David O'Farrell, or some of the new members like myself who are getting involved and trying to make a difference. Give us a chance to try to get things done. We are listening. We want to hear your voices. We want to have your insight and information. And if it wasn't for this crisis of change right now that we're in, I think that, I wouldn't have gotten to know a Pat Cummings as well as I do. And I'm thankful for that. I wouldn't have been as close friends with an Aron Wellman, and I'm very appreciative of that. So in every situation, good things can evolve from it. Just give it a chance.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing is no, we don't need any demonization of anybody, because, there are, beyond just the board, there's a lot of people that work for the Jockey Club who have their hearts in the right place and are busting their ass to try to grow this sport. So when you just say, you just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say the Jockey Club's done such a poor job and it should be abolished and this and that, you're not helping, because you're going to get rid of a lot of people who care a lot about this game's growth. And like I said, they should come to the table now. Like, there's no excuse not to come to the table, but it can't start from a point of, well, the Jockey Club is useless, get rid of it. Right. Because, like I said, in addition to the people that work for them, that are, doing their best, like, we have had zero unification in this game other than them.
Right.
Like they are the only, one of the reasons that they take so much heat is they're the only kind of central office that we even have in this business. And shortcomings or no, like those are people that you want to work with that have been that centralized body, such as there is one, and have done it now for decades. Those are people you want to work with, not shout at. And I'm glad that it seems like we're coming to a more conciliatory tone where it's not, well, you have bad intentions, or you're just, you just waiting, sitting idly by while the sport dies. No, people fucking care.
Right.
And just as much as you do. And it's time to get in a room and have those kind of productive discussions and not relitigate the past and what should have or shouldn't have been done. Rail Talk is sponsored by Tailor Made. Shout out to the team at Tailor Made who can help you with the sales, with the stallions, with boarding, with partnerships. You want to go visit them and see, all of the immaculate beauty of the Tailor Made farm and all the horses that they're raising there. You can do that as well. Obviously, their sales consignments get the most attention. And John, you said that you've used them for the digital sales recently, and it's worked out well.
Yeah, Joe. I mean, the most recent example is we had 5 horses entered into the Phasic digital sale. Not only did we have 100% clearance rate of all 5 selling, but Joe, did you know that we sold the horses for 41% more than we anticipated? 41% more, thanks to our friends at Tailor Made.
Shout out to Tailor Made. Go to tailormadefarm.com to learn more. Those consignments are second to none. You can find out why. So we are so thrilled to bring this next guest to the Rail Talk studio, the recently appointed executive director of New Vocations, Anna Ford. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John and Joe. Happy to be here.
Well, great to have you. Obviously, aftercare has been in the news and been discussed a lot recently, and I think it's very timely to have you on as one of the foremost experts in this area. You had a letter to the editor recently at the TDN, my old stomping grounds. The title was "Good Intentions Are No Longer Enough," and it's kind of a little bit of a retrospective about your meeting in 2011 that created the TAA and kind of how much talk there's been since then, and not as much action potentially as we would like. So my first question is, like, where's the disconnect, do you think? Because it seems like there's a lot of really well-intentioned people, a lot with a lot of money as well. Is it just a matter of not enough people ponying up? Is it a lack of coordination, lack of innovation? Like, why is there so much talk and then not enough results?
Well, I think that, looking back at 2011, you referenced that, it was amazing that everyone agreed at that meeting. And there was a lot of different owners, trainers, sheriffs, stakeholders, all the things, aftercare affiliates. Everyone agreed that we need to do more for aftercare. And I feel like fast forward, we're at that same place. And we, everyone agrees that aftercare is, really chronically underfunded, and that we need to do a lot more and we need to do a lot better. But what we haven't really been talking about is that there's not really a central, body to bring it all together to say, here's what the plan is. Here's the infrastructure that we're proposing that we could put together to really tackle all of aftercare. Up until this time, there's more funding than there was in 2011. There's a granting and accreditation system that was not around in 2011. But that was supposed to be the start. We weren't supposed to just stall there. But we have, and there really hasn't been a collective leadership to say, hey, here's where we are now. Here's the next steps. Here's what we got to do to move beyond that. Because, I know that New Vocations, we're just a small part of the solution. We're just one aftercare option organization that's out there that's being utilized within the industry. But there's a lot of other organizations out there, and there's a lot of other initiatives that are for profit as well. They're doing phenomenal work. But there really hasn't been a way to bring everybody together to tackle it in the way that I feel like it needs to be tackled.
And what would be the perfect scenario from a funding standpoint? Because I know you're saying structure is important and leadership is important. But at the end of the day, it's also going to come down to the funding mechanisms. And there've been a lot of different models that have been thrown out there and suggestions, whether it's, when you register a foal, there's a fee. When you buy a horse at a sale, there's a, for lack of a term, a tax on it, for retirement. Rapoli came up with an idea of stallions that are standing, throughout the country, that a stud fee should be donated to aftercare. What do you feel like is the best, or is it a combination thereof? Like, what in a perfect world, how would you change the process?
So again, going back to when TA was founded, it was a very similar funding structure. The stallions farms were all included on that. And I think it was like maybe 25% of your stallion fee was adjusted. I think anyone that is making money in the racing industry needs to be able to contribute in some way, shape, or form. And obviously breeders, owners, are the large part of that. I think, what the Jockey Club initially started doing with TAA was phenomenal, but that was a starting point as well with those registration fees. The registration fee was just a start. And I feel like, that could increase every area that's giving, with the sales companies as well, buyers and sellers, the 0.25% or whatever, however you say that. I always get confused with it, but that was always a starting point as well. So I feel like if we went back to that initial structure and said, okay, we've got a plan first. Like, that's what I think we're missing is, what is the plan? Like, how do we distribute funds and grow aftercare, grow the capacity with the groups that are already at full capacity? What is the plan? And then go back to the sales companies, go back to Jockey Club, go back to Breeders' Cup, racetracks, and say, hey, this is the plan. Now, can you increase what you're currently doing? And I feel like there would be more buy-in at that point. But instead, we kind of go back to, well, we got to give more money, got to give more money, got to give more money. And most people, I would be like, well, what are you going to do with the money? What? And obviously, we know it's going to go in to good places, but like, you still need to have a plan. It was evident when we built, I'm here at Merriworth Farm facility we built here. We had never done a capital campaign when we built this facility 10 years ago. And I was really nervous because it was, over $1 million, multi-million-dollar facility. It was the easiest fundraiser that we had ever had because people could see exactly where the money was going to go, what the plan was, how many horses it was going to serve. And it was amazing how quickly we were able to raise support because everything was very transparent on where the funds were going to go. So I feel like that's really the angle we need to go first, is figure out what the infrastructure looks like and how much funds are needed. And then go start asking for people to increase or give if they aren't already giving.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one of the issues that people have, and New Vocations, I think, does a great job of this, is taking horses off the track that aren't necessarily turnkey. You can make them a hunter or a jumper or a eventer or whatever, like horses that either can't have a second career or will need a significant amount of training to have a second career. Is there any way that we can make that process more seamless? Because I feel like a lot of times it's just based on word of mouth. Like, I know this person is looking for a horse, or this person has the stall available. Maybe some kind of registration process, or for lack of a better word, like a classified system. Is there any way that we can join people that do want to adopt horses and the horses off the track any more seamlessly?
Yeah. So you're talking about just adopters with horses?
Yeah, and not horses that aren't necessarily ready to start a second career right away.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there could be collaboration of all the groups, figuring out is there a one-stop shop where someone's looking to adopt a horse? Where do they go? Right now it's kind of a free-for-all. You probably Google, or you're following someone on Instagram and then you see it. So there really isn't a one-stop shop website that can show all thoroughbreds that are available in the country. So I do think that creating something like that would be really beneficial. On the flip side, I think that we really need a phone number, website, email for owners, trainers that have a horse that they don't know what to do with, to be able to call and have someone, a real live person, say, hey, here's your options in your state. Where are you? Oh, you're in New York. Here, why don't you call Take the Lead? Why don't you call Finger Lakes Finest? Like, someone, they don't have to take, like, that entity doesn't have to take all the horses, but they can at least be a resource to help direct people in the right direction. Because I do know that's challenging for a lot of people in the industry trying to figure out what to do with their horses. Because we've seen the awareness is out there. People want to do right by their horses. They just often don't know what the options are. In our office, I mean, if we get a call and it's a horse that, say it's a broodmare, for example, because we're not set up to take broodmares. We give them a whole list of, here's some other options for that horse. We're not sure if they can take your horse, but here are some other options of facilities that do take broodmares. Here's their phone number, here's their email. But wouldn't it be great if there was like, one number, 1-800 number that you could call and get some answers?
Yeah, no doubt.
Right. And Anna, how have you seen New Vocations change and grow over the years? Because it's been a family affair. I mean, you've been doing this for what, over 2 decades now?
25 years. Yeah.
Wow.
What have I seen? Sorry, say that again.
Yeah. So how have you seen over the past 25 years, how have you seen New Vocations change and grow and develop? Because this has been a family affair and also a labor of love for you guys. I'm sure that where New Vocations is right now was in no way, shape, or form on your mind 25 years ago.
No, it wasn't. A lot has changed. When we first started, we're just starting to get, we had a website. I remember the website was a huge thing, talking about putting horses on websites. Like, that was a whole different process back then. My mom put handwritten signs. We were in Ohio. That's where we started, at Beulah Park, River Downs at the time, and Thistle Park, handwritten signs about, hey, don't sell your horse to an auction or to someone you don't know. Call me, I'll come pick it up. And so we went from physically going down to tracks and picking up horses for people to, within a couple years, she was taking in 100 horses just at our family farm, which is when I started to get involved, because it was just my mom placing 100 horses a year, which is crazy, right? And at that time, we weren't seeing, I'm not sure, we weren't seeing as many horses that needed rehab back then. And I'm not sure why that was, if we were screening them differently, or if, I'm not sure, but what we have, the biggest change that we've seen in the last 25 years is that everything that we were doing back then, it's like times 10 what we have to do now to find the horses home. So, for example, the length of stay back then was probably a month. Now it's 140 days. We're rehabbing 70% of the horses that come in are needing some type of rehab prior to adoption. So all of that, and then, so that's on our end, just getting the horse even ready for adoption has just taken so much more time, so many more resources. Obviously we have multiple facilities now to service in different states and areas of the country. And then on the flip side, what the equestrian world is wanting from us to place these horses has also, grew 10 times as well, where, we used to be able to just say, hey, we've got a photo of the horse, know its disposition, we haven't sat on it or ridden it, and people would adopt those horses. Now we have the horses for a month on end. We've ridden them. Some of them we've jumped. We've taken them on trail rides. We've done all this work. And then the doctor's still like, well, can you go jump at a cross country jump and send us the video? What they're wanting is so much more. And then, before we would hardly have any pre-purchase exams because, for a $1,000 horse, like, you're going to spend $1,000 pre-purchasing a horse. And so people wouldn't really necessarily do that. Well, now almost all of our doctors want a pre-purchase exam, which is fine. We're happy to do that, but it's just like another, that takes another week that horse is in the program, to get the vet organized, to have them come out and look at the horses. So, that's been a big change, and we just adapt every year. We work really hard. January is when we do all of our strategic planning. And I mean, for 25 years in January, it's like, wow, this is getting a little bit harder. We got to do more, So.
Yeah. I mean, in one way,
John, like if she had known what we were going to grow to, she probably wouldn't have started the program. It would have scared me.
Well, I mean, it's good that the demand for horses off the track seems to be growing as well. So that's the upside of it. I have a more philosophical question for you, Anna, and because a lot of people debate this when horses, end up in bad spots, and how far back the responsibility should go. Because obviously, if you own the horse and most recently, and they end up in, God forbid, a kill pen or something like that, yeah, you should be responsible. If you own the horse earlier in their career and they were racing for you, I think so as well. But then some people say it should go all the way back to the breeders, and the breeders should have a hand in placing the horse, even though they own the horse maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. What do you think? Like, how does that break down for you? Like, how many people do you think along the line should have to pick up the phone if the horse ends up in a bad spot?
No, that's a tough question. I mean, and you see it out there all the time, right? Like it's horrible. And it's not going to be going away. I just want to plug, the Safe Act right now. If the industry could do anything for aftercare, if they could get the Safe Act passed, that would just eliminate the whole kill pen scenario, which is also smoke and mirrors, in my opinion. So just put that out there, that's a huge thing that we have to get past. But who's responsible? I think it's two parts. So when you see these things happen online, it really hurts my soul when people are being called out that a horse you bred has ended up in a kill pen. And it's kind of like they link it as this is your fault, when in fact,
right,
it normally is not their fault, right? So there's two questions, like whose fault is it? And then who's responsible to help that horse, right? And so I always look at it as, first of all, it's rarely the Racing's Connection's fault. And that needs to be clarified. And that's something that, it's really hard for, I think, those people that are out there, just, keyboard warriors to understand. But when it comes to responsibility, yeah, I would think that the person that obviously was responsible for putting that horse in there would be the person that's ultimately responsible. But the fact is, they're probably not going to be the ones that do anything about it, right? So that's where, when it's out there in social media world, you do see owners and breeders step up and purchase those horses back, because it's not because they did the wrong thing, but they feel the person that's responsible is not going to do something, then they're going to do something. And you see that time. And I see more of the industry stepping up and doing something than not. Now, when you have some of those smaller owners and breeders, they might not be as aware of what's going on. Maybe they're not stepping up, I'm not sure, but it is tough. But I think there's two questions there, they need to, you need to be able to separate the two.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Joe, I don't know if you know this, but New Vocations is our go-to whenever we have a horse that we need to repurpose or come off the racetrack. And it's been that way for well over a decade. And we've always enjoyed our relationship and the, the information we get from New Vocations. So you talk about, not only who's to blame when horses go in a certain direction, but the other way also. When we donate a horse, to New Vocations, I know I can sleep at night because that horse is going to get the utmost care. It's going to get rehabilitated and repurposed. And then we get really cool updates, almost on a quarterly basis in the beginning, but then later on where we see the horse actually develop its new life in a new role. And I'm going to embarrass you a little bit just by reading the adopter comments on a horse that we just donated, we named Complete 180, and they've renamed it Xander. And the adopter talks glowingly about Xander and the fact that the horse was a little extra cautious in the beginning, but now is a full life of spunk and gives the other two off the track thoroughbreds a run for their money in play departments. And it just, that stuff warms my heart, because here's a horse that gave everything he could for us as a racehorse. and for one reason or another just wasn't, suited for that role in his life. And now he has a completely different life, and we get to see photos and get, reports and everything like that. You guys do such a phenomenal job of keeping us in the loop on what's going on. That is unique in my estimation compared to other, not-for-profits. When was that brainchild put together? And is that every horse, or is that just the ones you guys that we donate?
No, it's every horse's. And my mom started the updates back in the day. Obviously it got overwhelming for her. She couldn't do it as much as she wanted to, but she would require updates. Initially, we did 2 years worth of updates. And so, yeah, we've been doing that as long as I can remember. But where it really got going was, I think it was 2004 or 5 when we hired our first intern to really go through and, like, if we weren't getting updates, email the people, follow up with the people. So we get the updates and all that kind of stuff. So, now we have a full-time person that's all she does is bugs people for their updates. And of course she's troubleshooting if there's issues. And I always tell people, we really didn't have hardly any returns, any horses coming back to our program before we required updates. And it wasn't that we didn't have horses that didn't land not that they didn't land, but maybe it wasn't the right match, or people have financial issues or whatever. But as soon as our adopters realized, wow, they actually do care and they're going to follow up and they want a photo. Oh, they mean business. Okay. Well, then it was also a reminder, like, hey, if this is not the right horse for you, or your child goes to college, or you lose your job, like, we're here. Send the horse back. We'll always be here to help you, in those situations. So, but yeah, the updates is a huge part. And I think it's been a great way for us to, like, owners like yourself, John, it shows exactly what the horses are going to do. And it just kind of helps you understand, because I'm sure each horse you sent, they're doing different things. I think Father Time, he's Western riding, if you remember him. So, and then you've got some that do English or jumper. So it's all, but it helps, that we also see that as it's a vital part of what we do. It's a great way to raise awareness on what the horses do directly to the people who are supporting our program. I appreciate you saying that you can sleep at night, but I will say, until we get that safe act passed, no one can sleep at night unless they're in your backyard. Like, honestly.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. Very good point.
The ASPCA did a study, and the average horse its lifetime has 7 different owners. So it's really impossible to make sure the first home is the right home, because we do a lot of screening and all that kind of stuff. And we've got contracts, but contracts can be broken and people forget that they can send the horse back to us. So, we do sleep better, but until that safe act and horses aren't able to leave the country for slaughter, we can't sleep easy at night.
Yeah. Well said. And that's something that people should contact their representatives about as well, and make sure that that's a top priority for everybody that's involved in the game. Anna Ford, such a great conversation. Thank you so much for everything you do. And thank you so much for coming on with us. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me and helping spread the light on all the different things going on in aftercare right now.
All right, so that's going to do it for episode 125 of Rail Talk. Thank you to Anna Ford, the executive director of New Vocations, for stopping by and having that conversation about aftercare with us, one of the foremost experts in the field. You can go to newvocations.org or horseadoption.com to learn more about how you can help and all of the programs that they're doing to help our retired race horses find good spots after they're done on the track. Thank you to my co-pilot, John Green, as always, our producer, Patty Wolf, and our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. Not on the air next week. John and I will both be down in sunny, hot Ocala, scouting new recruits for West Point and for DJ Stables. So no show next week. We'll check in on a quick Mage Rage Derby contest update, but otherwise we'll see you for the full show back in 2 weeks here on Rail Talk.